When my daughter-in-law said I wasn't needed for Christmas, I just smiled. By New Year's, their mortgage was gone. They called and cried, but there was no answer. Because what awaited them next was far worse. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. The room erupted in laughter, and I was the punchline. Christmas dinner at Mark and Ava's house was supposed to be a warm gathering. Our first since the pandemic years, when family felt fragile and precious. But from the moment I walked into their Savannah home, I sensed the script was already written, and I was cast in the role of the intruder. I had carried a tin of homemade ginger cookies, the recipe handed down from my mother, the one Mark used to beg for every December as a child. My hand smelled faintly of cinnamon and butter as I pressed the tin into Ava's manicured grip. She accepted it with a frozen smile and slid it onto the counter without so much as a thank you. I watched her fingers hover instead over the gleaming screen of her phone, her true companion for the evening. Dinner began, candles flickering against crystal glasses, the air scented with rosemary and roast beef. Ava's voice sliced through the clatter of cutlery, pitched deliberately louder than necessary, her phone angled just so. "Ellen, this year without you. It'll be calmer." A pause. Then laughter, sharp and collective, spreading around the table like a brush fire. Her parents tittered, her peer colleagues smirked into their wine. Even the neighbors chuckled awkwardly, grateful not to be the target. Mark, my son, my boy whom I once rocked to sleep through fevers, whom I taught to balance a checkbook, whom I saved from the humiliation of wearing second-hand sneakers in high school, kept his eyes pinned to his plate. His fork scraped porcelain. His silence screamed louder than their jeers. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, the weight of every pair of eyes measuring my worth, finding me lacking. Ava wasn't finished. She gestured to a gift bag on the sideboard, glitter letters spelling Ella instead of Ellen. It slid across the table toward me with theatrical flair. I opened it. Tissue paper crinkled hollow. Empty. "Santa says, maybe don't come uninvited next time." Her lips curled around the words with rehearsed sweetness, every syllable broadcast for her Instagram story. She leaned closer to her phone, ensuring the moment was captured, archived, amplified. I pressed the bag shut with trembling fingers. For a second I thought I might faint. The blood in my ears roared. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to remind them of the years I had been the one hosting Christmas in my modest home, the one who stayed up until midnight basting turkeys, sewing costumes for pageants, wrapping gifts I could barely afford. But my throat closed and all that escaped was silence. I stood, clutching my purse, the chair legs screeching against hardwood. But before I could reach the door, Ava lifted her glass high. "Here's to a year without toxicity." Glasses rose. Smiles gleamed. A chorus of agreement. Even the neighbors who barely knew me clinked their drinks, eager not to be out of step. It was a toast to my erasure. I stepped outside into the December night, the Savannah air heavy with pine and saltwater. My phone buzzed. The family WhatsApp group, our shared album of baby photos, milestones, tiny videos of my granddaughter's laugh, was gone. My access revoked. In one click, years of digital memory vanished, as though I had never been part of her life at all. The humiliation was complete. Not just exclusion but public execution, staged as holiday entertainment. As I drove along the riverfront, headlights cutting through the mist, memory attacked me in fragments. I remembered Mark's first apartment, peeling paint, a broken lock. I had emptied my savings for his deposit. I remembered Ava's first Christmas with us, when I sewed stockings with her name stitched in red thread, even though she barely looked at me. I remembered the $85,000 check, written with shaking hands, to secure their dream home. Money I had said was a gift, though it came from years of skipped vacations, overtime hours, and the small bakery chain I had built from nothing. Back then, Ava had called me her second mother. Her tone was syrupy, rehearsed, the kind of sweetness that tastes wrong on the tongue. She had kissed my cheek when I signed the check, whispering, "We couldn't have done it without you." I mistook it for love. It was only strategy. Tonight revealed the truth. Their home sparkled, golden lights strung along Magnolia Lane, the kind of display neighbors drove past to admire. But I knew the cost. The mortgage I helped fund. The luxury furniture bought on cards I once co-signed. The endless stream of curated parties, all built on borrowed money and borrowed kindness. I wasn't needed anymore. Not for Christmas, not for milestones, not for photos. Not even for my granddaughter. I was a relic, useful once, embarrassing now. The word Ava had chosen, toxic, repeated in my mind, over and over like a cruel mantra. Toxic. As though my love, my sacrifices, my presence were poison. But I remembered other words too. Words she had whispered when she needed me. You're such a blessing. Your family. We'll never forget this. Lies. As I turned onto my street, headlights sweeping across the familiar outline of my small house, the silence inside called to me. For the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt clarifying. A clean wound finally acknowledged. I placed the empty gift bag on the counter. Its hollowness mocked me. I thought of all the times I had filled theirs, with money, with groceries, with endless patience. I thought of the photos I no longer had access to, the child's laughter that had been stolen from me with the press of a button. And I whispered into the stillness, never again. This Christmas they had stripped me of illusion. And in doing so, they had given me something far more enduring than family cheer, the clarity of betrayal. I didn't argue. There was a time years ago when I would have defended myself, raised my voice, tried to salvage dignity out of public mockery. But age teaches you the futility of explaining yourself to people who have already decided you are worthless. That night I gave them nothing. Not anger, not tears, not a spectacle they could record for their followers. Instead I drove. Savannah's riverfront unfurled before me, the December air thick with pine and salt water. Street lamps painted long shadows across the cobblestones, and the water lapped against the pilings with the same rhythm it had when I first arrived in this city 35 years ago, a widow clutching a toddler's hand. Mark was 2 then. I had no one, nothing but my degree in accounting, a restless determination, and the memory of a husband buried too young. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long while, hands stiff on the wheel. The house looked small against the winter sky, the same house I had raised Mark in, the same front porch where I once sat sleepless, rocking him when fever spiked. How ironic, I thought, that a boy I once cradled against my chest now sat complicit in my public execution. Inside I made tea, black, strong, unsweetened. The steam rose in curls as I carried it to the dining table. There, waiting in its heavy binder, was the Roberts Family Trust folder. My late husband's surname. My son's. Mine. I opened it. The smell of paper and ink was oddly comforting. Each tab divider a piece of my life. Wills, deeds, checks, contracts. Numbers at least had never lied to me. On the first page, in my neat accountant's handwriting, was the record of the gift I had made them. $85,000, wired directly from my savings account to cover the down payment on their home. I had written a simple agreement, clear, unemotional. 3 conditions. No luxury loans, no public insults, no misuse of funds. A contract more of conscience than legality. They had signed it, both of them, their names looping confidently across the page. Their mortgage. $328,000. Manageable with discipline, impossible with arrogance. And Ava never believed in discipline. For her, truth was plastic, to be reshaped as image demanded. PR was her trade. Image first, reality last. She had married my son not just for his earnest heart but for the scaffolding of support I provided. She knew he was pliable. She knew I was generous. She played us both like instruments. And now she had cut me off surgically in one evening's performance. But she had forgotten one thing. I was not only a mother. I was an accountant. A baker who had risen before dawn for decades, building a chain of small shops one croissant at a time. A woman who had watched every cent, filed every receipt, balanced every ledger. Ava's we *p*** was narrative. Mine was proof. I pulled out the folder marked receipts. They stared back at me like silent witnesses. Cancelled checks, electronic transfers, deposits marked gift. And then in my phone, evidence of their cruelty, the Christmas video Ava had streamed, the group chat where she had called me toxic, the family album stripped away like I was never grandmother to that child. My hands stopped trembling. They were steady now, clinical as I began to sort. One pile. Their mortgage documents. Another. Proof of my $85,000. Another. Screensh *TS of Ava's slurs. And last. A small cream-colored business card tucked in the back pocket of the binder. Mary Carter, loan officer. Savannah Credit Union. Mary had been a friend since my bakery days. We used to meet before sunrise, her for coffee before the branch opened, me with flour still dusted on my sleeves. She had once told me, half joking, half serious, "Ellen, if you ever need to move mountains with paper, call me." I sipped my tea. The bitterness no longer bothered me. A plan had begun to take shape, sharp, inevitable, simple. Ava had declared me unnecessary, a relic. Mark had lowered his eyes and said nothing. Very well. Then I would do what accountants do best, balance the books. I picked up the phone and stared at Mary's number. Not yet. Timing mattered. Instead, I sat there in the quiet, letting memory wash over me piece by piece. I remembered my bakery at dawn, the air thick with yeast and sugar. I remembered pushing a stroller down River Street, Mark pointing at tugboats, his small voice crying, "Mama, look!" I remembered the years of silence when Ava began to pull him away, family dinners I wasn't invited to, birthdays where my name was mentioned as afterthought, always explained away as too busy. Next time. Every slight I had swallowed. Every insult I had rationalized. Until tonight. Tonight they had said it plainly. You are not needed. And if I was not needed, I would stop pretending. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. A strange calm spread through me. They thought my silence at dinner was weakness. They thought my retreat was defeat. But silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is simply the space before a storm. When my tea was gone, I washed the cup, placed it in the rack, and set the binder on the counter where I could see it in the morning light. I whispered to no one, to the shadows, to the ghosts of my husband and the young boy Mark once was. It ends now. On the morning of December 26th, the air was still heavy with pine needles and leftover smoke from the fireworks neighbors had fired into the Savannah night. I sat at my kitchen table with a pad of lined paper, my father's old fountain pen, and the Roberts Family Trust binder open in front of me. The empty gift bag from Christmas dinner still sat in the corner of the room, as if mocking me with its bright red lettering, Ella, not Ellen. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the hollow laughter, Ava's voice pitched just so for her phone camera. Here's to a year without toxicity. No, this was not about toxicity. This was about debt. And if there was one language I understood better than Ava's slick PR slogans, it was debt. I picked up my phone and dialed Mary Carter. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and steady, the same voice that used to order apple turnovers every Monday morning before heading into the credit union. Ellen, I didn't expect to hear from you the day after Christmas. Everything all right? There was a pause in me. How do you explain that your family staged your public execution over roast beef and wine? How do you tell someone that your granddaughter's photos were erased from your phone, as if you had never been her grandmother? I didn't. I kept my voice cool. I need information on a mortgage note. Mark Roberts. Magnolia Lane. There was a short silence on her end. Papers shuffled. Keys clicked. Then Mary exhaled slowly. Funny you should ask. That loan was just listed for sale. Delinquent escrow and HOA fines. They've been sloppy. Very sloppy. I felt a strange stillness spread through me. Can I purchase it? Mary hesitated. Through your LLC, yes. It's not complicated if you know the process. Most people wouldn't even think of it. Then let's begin, I said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 3 decades of sacrifice, humiliation, and now clarity. By December 27th, the papers were signed. Through my small LLC, the same one I had used years ago to expand my bakery into 3 storefronts. I bought Mark and Ava's mortgage note. 11% discount, thanks to their unpaid dues. I had done more complicated calculations before dawn in my bakery days. This was arithmetic compared to rolling out croissants at 3 in the morning. On December 30th, I stood in the county recorder's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and watched the clerk stamp the file with finality. Assignment of deed of trust. The words echoed in my chest. I now owned their debt. I stepped outside into the chilly air, my breath visible. Around me, Savannah moved as if nothing had changed. Cars passed. Children tugged their parents toward post-holiday sales. But in my hands, folded neatly in a manila envelope, was the instrument of power. For the first time in years, I felt no weight on my chest. That night, New Year's Eve, I sat alone in my living room. My house smelled faintly of lemon polish, I had cleaned it from top to bottom that day, reclaiming space that had long felt neglected. I poured myself a single glass of champagne, nothing fancy, just enough to mark the turning of time. At midnight, as fireworks cracked in the distance, I checked my phone. A flurry of calls had beg *N. First, "Mom, what happened?" from Mark. His voice was ragged, confused. Then Ava, her tone honeyed, almost playful. "Oh, thank you for the gift?" White heart. The audacity. She thought this was generosity, that I had waved a wand and cleared her slate. She thought she had one. I let the calls ring. I let the texts sit unread. Silence was my only reply. The holidays were over. Real life was about to begin. In the days that followed, I studied every detail of their loan file. I examined late fees, HOA complaints, unpaid property taxes. I highlighted each clause in the agreement they had signed when they took my $85,000. No luxury loans. No misuse of funds. No public insults. They had violated every single one. I found charges for a holiday beauty haul on Ava's credit card, paid with funds that had once passed through my hands. I found the Airbnb listings, illegal rentals, their address pasted online like a hotel. I found neighbors' complaints about noise at 2 in the morning. Fireworks launched from their backyard while infants cried next door. Every piece was a nail and I held the hammer. On January 2nd, I sent the first tremor through their walls. A courier in a navy jacket walked up Magnolia Lane and handed Mark an envelope. Inside, "Notice to cure and accelerate." The violations were listed in black and white. False statements on their mortgage application. Misuse of gifted funds. 3/4 of unpaid HOA dues. Luxury charges in violation of the agreement. They had 10 days to respond. That evening, Ava went live on social media. Her eyes wide, her voice trembling just enough to look sincere. "A cruel relative is trying to take our home, crying face," she sobbed into the camera. Comments streamed in, hearts, sympathy, prayers. But I had already sent her HR department *TS of her messages calling me a witch and toxic. I attached receipts of her spending sprees, proof that her sob story was nothing but performance. When Mark called me, his voice cracked. "Mom, please don't ruin my life." For a moment, just a moment, I remembered the boy who once held my hand too tightly on the first day of school, who begged me not to leave him at the classroom door. That memory almost softened me. Almost. But then I remembered Christmas night. I remembered the empty gift bag. I remembered the toast to my erasure. "My terms are simple," I told him, my voice steady. "Public apologies. Therapy. Repayment of $20,000 for wasted luxuries. And a strict budget." He was silent. Then Ava's voice pierced through the line, shrill and furious. "We don't owe you anything." And the line went dead. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't explain. Instead, I opened my binder and placed their mortgage file neatly inside. Ava could cry on camera, but the deed was mine. She could scream about cruelty, but the numbers didn't lie. For 30 years I had been the one bending. Now it was time for them to learn what it felt like when the ground gave way. And I, calm, precise, merciless, was the one holding the ledger. On the morning of January 2nd, when most of Savannah was still sweeping confetti from porches and nursing champagne headaches, I set in motion the part they could not laugh off. The courier, a broad-shouldered man in a navy jacket, walked up Magnolia Lane with a thick white envelope tucked under his arm. I had chosen a courier instead of ordinary mail for one reason: performance. Just as Ava had performed her cruelty at Christmas, I would perform accountability. There is something about an official handoff, about a stranger ringing your bell with papers in his grip, that no amount of pure spin can soften. I wasn't there to see it, but later a neighbor described the moment to me with relish. Mark opened the door, still in his fire department sweats. Ava in the background wearing a silk robe. The man announced, "Delivery for Mark Roberts," and extended the envelope. Mark took it with confusion, then paled as his eyes caught the heading stamped across the first page. "Notice to cure and accelerate." Inside, every violation was listed in language stripped of charm and excuses. False statements on their loan application. Misuse of gifted funds. 3 consecutive quarters of unpaid HOA dues. Luxury purchases that directly contradicted the terms of the family agreement. 10 days. That was the timeline I had given them to respond before foreclosure proceedings advanced. That evening my phone lit up with Ava's live broadcast. She was good, too good. The camera angle just low enough to catch the curve of her cheek, her voice quivering in practiced sorrow. A cruel relative, she said, pausing as if swallowing tears, is trying to take our home. We don't know how we'll survive this kind of abuse. Crying face. Thousands of hearts floated up the screen. Supportive comments poured in. Stay strong, Ava. Prayers for your family. But I had prepared my own stage. Earlier that afternoon, I had drafted an email to her HR department at the agency. I attached screenshots of her private messages calling me a witch and trash. Timestamps aligning perfectly with the Christmas video. I included receipts of her December spending spree, labeled Holiday Beauty Haul, purchased with family funds that were supposed to cover property expenses. I wrote nothing emotional, only facts, only numbers. Within hours her manager replied, "Thank you for providing documentation. We take ethical concerns seriously." Ava cried on camera. I sent receipts to the one place where reputation mattered more than sympathy, her workplace. Mark called me that night. His voice was raw, broken. "Mom," he whispered as though Ava might overhear. "Don't do this. Don't ruin my life." I closed my eyes and tried to remember him as a boy, Mark with grass stains on his knees, Mark who once saved his allowance to buy me a second-hand necklace for Mother's Day. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who let his wife humiliate me for applause. "This isn't about ruin," I said quietly. "It's about accountability. My terms are simple." "What terms?" His desperation crackled through the line. "Public apologies," I said. "Both of you. Not to me, though you owe me that, but to the family, to the neighbors who watched you perform cruelty at Christmas. Therapy. Repayment of $20,000 for wasted luxuries. And a strict budget moving forward." He inhaled sharply. For a moment I thought he might agree. But then I heard her voice, sharp as glass, in the background. "We don't owe you anything." And the line went dead. I didn't slam the phone. I didn't cry. I simply reached for my binder and slid the notice back inside, pages smooth and ready. Ava could livestream her tears. I would livestream facts to the people who mattered. And people were already whispering. On the neighborhood app next door, one post appeared. "Did anyone else hear fireworks from Magnolia Lane at 2 a.m. last week? We couldn't sleep, baby screaming all night." Replies stacked beneath it. Another neighbor attached photos, blurry but damning, of Mark and Ava setting off rockets while cradling wine glasses. The HOA president, Mr. Hardy, had already logged 3 complaints. Noise, trash, unpaid dues. He was a stern man, with white hair cropped short and an accountant's memory for numbers. When I called him, his tone was grim. "They think the HOA is a suggestion," he said. "Not anymore. We'll be filing fines." Good, I thought. Let accountability come from every side. On January 9th, the next tremor struck. A bright orange paper was taped to their front door. Notice of sale. Neighbors saw it before they did. Whispers spread across Magnolia Lane. By the time Ava discovered it, the entire street had driven past twice just to gawk. She responded the only way she knew how. Another live stream. Makeup streaked from fake tears, voice high-pitched. "We are being attacked by a cruel relative. They want to steal our home." The comments began supportive, but cracks appeared quickly. Mrs. Green, who had been at the Christmas dinner, typed, "Why did you call Ellen trash at your table?" The live ended within 60 seconds. By then, Ava's narrative was unraveling faster than she could patch it. Screenshots circulated. Neighbors sharing her cruel toasts, recordings of her laughter. The story she wanted to control slipped through her manicured fingers. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. I didn't need to scream. I had the deed. The silence in my house was different now. Not empty. Not lonely. But steady, powerful. Like the stillness before a courtroom verdict. I brewed my evening tea, lemon this time, and sat at the kitchen table. My binder was open, my notes meticulous. They had called me toxic. They had toasted to my erasure. But on January 2nd, the courier handed them something they couldn't erase with laughter. A notice is not an opinion. It's a fact. And facts, unlike families, do not betray you. I learned long ago that arguments fade, but paper doesn't. Screensh asterisk TS don't. Numbers don't. That's the difference between Ava and me. She builds illusions, I build ledgers. The morning after the notice of sale appeared on Magnolia Lane, my phone began to buzz with messages from acquaintances, neighbors, even former customers of my bakery. I hadn't said a word, but people already knew. Because in the age of the internet, humiliation doesn't stay behind one door. It spreads like spilled ink. It started with a single post on Nextdoor. A woman 3 houses down wrote, "Did anyone else see the orange foreclosure notice at the Roberts house? Sad situation. But I can't say I'm surprised." She didn't have to finish the sentence. The comments piled up like dry leaves catching fire. Yes, the fireworks at 2 a.m. were outrageous. They run that house like it's a nightclub. I heard they've been renting it out illegally on weekends. Isn't that against HOA rules? Then came photos. Mr. Hardy, the HOA president, shared 3 images from his file. Ava in a sequin dress holding a sparkler at 2:15 in the morning. Mark carrying a cooler into the backyard while 2 strangers unloaded luggage. The grass trampled and burnt patches where rockets had exploded. The thread grew by the hour. By noon, someone had linked Ava's social media account, where her curated life still glowed with expensive handbags, holiday hauls, and captions like "Work hard, play harder sparkles #BossLife." Against the backdrop of foreclosure papers taped to her door, the photos looked grotesque. I didn't have to lift a finger. But I did. I chose my timing with care. The way a baker knows exactly when dough has risen enough to face the heat. I uploaded a few documents, not to Facebook, not to Instagram, but to places where people pay attention: a community forum, a private neighborhood board, and most effectively, an anonymous tip to the local news outlet's Savannah accountability column. The documents spoke for themselves. Screensh asterisk TS of Ava mocking me as toxic in her family group chat. Receipts of luxury makeup orders labeled emergency on their joint credit account. Records of 3 consecutive missed HOA dues. My own canceled check for $85,000, annotated gift for home purchase, conditions agreed. I wrote no commentary. I let silence do the talking. By evening, the narrative Ava had tried to spin, cruel relative attacking us, was threadbare. The questions flooding her live videos shifted from sympathy to accusation. Why were you buying $600 worth of lipstick on family funds? Is it true your HOA fined you 3 times for noise? Why did you call Ellen trash at your Christmas dinner? Ava couldn't answer them all. Her voice wavered. The carefully painted mask cracked. She ended one live stream abruptly when a former client commented, "This is the woman managing my PR? Yikes." The internet does not forget. It archives. It recycles. We *P***nizes silence. Meanwhile, neighbors began watching Magnolia Lane like a theater stage. Cars slowed to a crawl past the Roberts house. People stood on porches with folded arms. One woman described Ava's furious outburst in the yard when Mr. Hardy arrived to deliver yet another fine. She screamed that he was petty, the neighbor told me later. But he just held up his phone, showing her the photos of fireworks and Airbnb guests. Calm as stone. She nearly threw a glass at him. Even Mark, once so eager to please, began to crack. I heard from a friend in the fire department that whispers had reached his station. A man can't keep his promotion when neighbors file complaints about his property and late-night disturbances. Image matters even in a uniform. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't raised my voice. Yet the consequences grew like ivy around their house, tightening each day. On January 9th, the official notice of sale was taped to their door in bold orange. It was the kind of color that could be seen from half a block away, screaming louder than any live stream. Ava tried to film over it, placing a wreath strategically to hide the paper. But neighbors snapped photos before she managed, and those photos spread online. People commented on the irony of her glittering holiday decor framing a foreclosure notice. She went live again, eyes red, saying, "We've been betrayed. We're victims of cruelty." But the comments betrayed her. Didn't you say Ellen wasn't welcome at Christmas? If she's so toxic, why were you living on her money? You called her a witch in texts. We've all seen the Screensh *TS. 60 seconds in, Ava ended the stream. The mask had slipped too far. I didn't watch her collapse with joy. I watched it with the same focus I once gave to baking. Patient, steady, precise. For years I had been dismissed, silenced, erased. Now I was methodical. I kept a folder on my desktop titled Evidence, each file labeled by date. Every screenshot *T. Every receipt. Every HOA letter. The Christmas video Ava herself had streamed. Because one thing I knew from both accounting and baking was that small things accumulate. One miscalculation can sink a business. One unpaid fee can become foreclosure. And one cruel Christmas can unravel a reputation. They had thought me irrelevant. But the internet has a long memory, and I had a longer one still. By the end of that week, I walked past the riverfront where tourists strolled, their arms full of pralines and souvenirs. I carried nothing but the quiet knowledge that the balance of power had shifted. The Roberts house on Magnolia Lane still stood, lit with fairy lights, but its foundation was hollow. The neighborhood knew. The internet knew. Their colleagues knew. Ava had tried to erase me with a toast. Instead, she had written herself into a record that would not disappear. The internet doesn't forget. And neither do I. When people perform cruelty in public, they forget one simple truth. Audiences are not confined to family tables or Instagram feeds. Employers watch. Colleagues watch. Reputation, Ava's chosen currency, never stays in the vault she intends. Ava must have believed her live streams reached only sympathetic strangers. But I had already chosen my audience carefully. I knew the agency she worked for prided itself on integrity-driven branding. I knew her supervisors, all sharp men and women who valued discretion above drama. And I knew no amount of glittering hashtags could withstand documented evidence. The email I had sent, quiet, precise, unembellished, did the work. Screenshot *TS of her mocking me as toxic trash in family chats. Proof that her lavish holiday beauty haul had been bought with funds earmarked for HOA fees. Video of her Christmas toast, wine glass raised in triumph as she announced, "Here's to a year without toxicity." By January 12th, an ethics review had been opened. It was a colleague of hers, not me, who forwarded me a whisper. "She's been put on unpaid leave. HR is combing through her client interactions." Another wrote, "We submitted screenshot *TS from her blog. She posted client details there for clout. That violates contract terms." Her colleagues had been waiting. My evidence only gave them permission. Mark's unraveling came quieter, but just as sharp. At the fire department, respect is currency. Your neighbors must trust you to carry them out of smoke, to break down their doors when flames rise. But how does that trust survive when those same neighbors file HOA complaints about you setting fireworks at 2 a.m.? When the president of the association delivers noise photos to your captain. By mid-January, word reached me through the same grapevine that had always sustained Savannah's gossip. Mark lost his chance at promotion. Too much bad press. I didn't rejoice. But I also didn't weep. Choices bear fruit. Some bitter. Some rotten. It was around this time I extended my one gesture of grace. Mediation. I invited them formally. Through the mediator's office downtown. Neutral ground, neutral voices. My terms had not changed. I would stop foreclosure if they issued a public apology, entered therapy, repaid $20,000 wasted on luxuries, committed to a strict 3-month budget under supervision. The mediator, a tired man with kind eyes, sat between us at the oval table. His office smelled faintly of paper and lavender cleaner. I brought my binder, every page annotated. Ava brought her phone. She arrived in oversized sunglasses, hair sleek, lips painted in a shade too bold for humility. "Let's start," the mediator said. His voice was low, deliberate. "Ellen has outlined her conditions clearly. She seeks accountability and respect." Mark shifted uncomfortably, hands clasped. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. Ava, on the other hand, pressed record on her phone, angling it discreetly but obviously. "We are not beggars," she declared, her tone honeyed yet sharp. "We don't live on scraps of approval. This is abuse. Emotional abuse. Financial abuse. We are victims." The mediator sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mrs. Roberts, this is not productive. The purpose here—" "No," Ava cut in. "The purpose here is control. She's trying to humiliate us again. First on the internet, now here. But guess what? She leaned forward, tapping the screen of her phone. The world is watching. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply opened my binder and slid forward a page with her signature at the bottom. The original agreement accompanying my $85,000 gift. Her name looped in black ink beneath the words, "No misuse of funds. No public insults." "Contracts don't vanish," I said quietly, "even if you hide behind cameras." Mark's face flushed. He muttered something, maybe my name, maybe a half-formed apology, but Ava's glare silenced him. The mediator exhaled slowly, then turned to me. "Ellen, it's clear we won't reach resolution today." "No," I said, gathering my papers. "We won't." I signed the order then and there, accelerating foreclosure. My pen didn't tremble. They must have thought it was bluff. That my silence was theater. That I, the woman Ava had declared unneeded for Christmas, would still fold under the weight of her tears. But I had no tears left. Only documents. Only consequences. When I left the mediation office, the January sky was cold and bright. Tourists wandered Broughton Street with shopping bags. A violinist played near the fountain. Life pulsed on, indifferent to betrayal. And I walked home lighter than I had in decades. By the third week of January, Ava's career was in shambles. The agency placed her on indefinite unpaid leave. A press release, quiet, clinical, stated, "Employee under review for ethical violations." Clients she once flaunted on social media pulled their accounts. Sponsorships evaporated. Her influencer contracts, those glossy deals she had paraded online, began to dissolve with the same speed they had once been signed. Every time she tried to film another teary explanation, commenters swarmed with receipts. "Didn't you laugh when you called Ellen toxic? Where did the $85,000 go? Why lie about HO fines?" The internet doesn't forget, but neither do employers. Meanwhile, Mark lived in quiet panic. Neighbors told me he looked thinner, shoulders slumped. He went to work, but without the promotion he had hoped for. The uniform that once gave him pride now carried whispers behind his back. "That's the guy losing his house," someone had said, loud enough for him to hear. And me? I remained still. I didn't clap at their downfall. I didn't dance on their ruin. I simply documented. Because this was never revenge. It was accounting. Every debit met its credit. Every insult met its consequence. The night after mediation collapsed, I sat alone at my table again, binder open. I brewed tea, lemon and honey this time, and thought about my husband. He had died decades ago, leaving me with a toddler and no map. I had survived on grit, on ledgers, on yeast rising before dawn. He would have understood this cold precision. "Balance the books," he used to say when money was tight. "Always balance the books." And I had. By accelerating foreclosure, I had given Mark and Ava the same clarity they had once given me. You are not needed. Not for Christmas, not for excuses, not for lies. When I closed the binder, the silence in the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. And in that silence I whispered into the empty room. Now the real lesson begins. January 23rd dawned gray and sharp. The kind of winter day in Savannah where the cold doesn't arrive with snow, but with a damp heaviness that seeps into your bones. It was the day everything shifted from paper to pavement, from documents to spectacle. The yard sale began before the auction. At 10 o'clock I drove slowly down Magnolia Lane, not stopping, not rolling down the window, simply passing by like any other neighbor. But the scene sprawled across their front lawn was impossible to miss. Tables sagged beneath the weight of their possessions. Crystal glasses once raised in toasts, designer handbags Ava had flaunted online. A widescreen television still showing the faint ring where it once hung in their living room. Handwritten cardboard signs read, "Urgent. Furniture. Electronics. Must go." Neighbors hovered, some curious, some pitying, some eager to snatch up bargains. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, whispering too loudly, "Why are they selling everything?" Mark looked hollow. He lifted heavy boxes onto the grass, his firefighter's shoulders hunched, his face pale. He did not shout, did not scowl, did not bargain with buyers. He simply moved, as though each object were a piece of himself being carried away. Ava was different. She snapped at customers, her voice brittle. "No, not for 20. That lamp cost us 300. She clutched a sequin dress against her chest, then hurled it into a pile when no one offered enough. When Mr. Hardy approached, polite as ever, asking if they needed assistance, she erupted. "You're petty," she spat. "All of you. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Watching us, waiting for us to fall." Mr. Hardy, calm as stone, pulled out his phone and held it up. On the screen, photographs of their 4th of July fireworks at 2:15 a.m. appeared one by one. Infants screaming in complaint emails. Cars double parked in fire lanes. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Accountability, Ava." She swore at him so loudly that children turned their heads. At precisely 10:40 a.m., the auction began. It took place not inside the house, but outside, under a gray tent erected on the courthouse steps downtown. The county requires transparency in foreclosure sales. Public setting, official auctioneer, open bids. I didn't want theater. I wanted finality. I arrived through the back, a plain black folder under my arm. Inside was the creditor's bid, mine. Numbers neat, decisive. No drama. The auctioneer, a lean man with silver hair, called the crowd to order. The case was read. Roberts property, Magnolia Lane, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, approximately 2,100 square feet. Bids opened. Silence. No one countered. No investor stepped forward. No stranger saw value in the house stripped of goodwill. At 10:46 a.m., gavel in hand, the auctioneer spoke the words that ended their dream. Property transferred to creditor's trust. 6 minutes. That's all it took to undo years of arrogance. Ava's scream pierced the air before the sound of the gavel even faded. "You stole it!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing against courthouse walls. Her phone was already in her hand, lens pointed outward, live streaming her fury. "This is theft. Everyone look at this cruelty." The auctioneer didn't blink. He adjusted his glasses, his voice calm, almost bored. "This is a lawful procedure, ma'am. Your property has been legally transferred." She wailed. She called me a vulture, a witch, a monster. Mark said nothing. His head hung so low I could barely see his face. I didn't approach them. I didn't speak. I walked away, the deed in my possession, leaving their accusations to echo unanswered. Because the truth is simple. The day you sign your name to paper, you accept its weight. The day you mock someone who paid your mortgage, you sign more than contracts, you sign your future. And on January 23rd, the music stopped. The fallout came quickly. Neighbors who had once smiled politely now crossed the street to avoid Ava's glares. Parents whispered to children, warning them not to repeat her shrieks. *TS of her courthouse breakdown circulated on forums. Hair wild, makeup streaked, voice cracking as she screamed, "We've been robbed." But in the same videos you could hear the auctioneer's calm reply. "This is a lawful procedure." Lawful. That word cut deeper than any insult. Ava thrived on image, but the law doesn't bend for curated feeds. Mark retreated into silence. He worked his shifts at the firehouse, but word spread fast. His colleagues had seen the videos, the HOA complaints, the live streams. The man once known for steady hands now carried the weight of scandal like a shadow. And me? I returned to my kitchen that evening, brewed a cup of tea, and placed the deed on my counter. I touched it gently, the way a baker presses a loaf to test if it's ready. It was warm with victory, yet cold with necessity. This wasn't triumph. It was correction. The balance had been restored. For decades, I had been the one keeping music playing at family gatherings, hosting dinners, buying gifts, filling silence with effort. And for decades they had let me. They had leaned on me, drained me, erased me. But now the music they danced to, the luxury dinners, the handbags, the curated images had ended. The record had spun to silence. And I, the one they called unnecessary, stood with the deed in hand. Foreclosure had shifted the ground beneath them, but I wasn't interested in dragging Mark and Ava into the street like common trespassers. That would have been Ava's fantasy narrative. Me, the cruel old woman, hurling her into the cold. I wanted something different. Something sharper. I wanted choice. Because choice carries weight. Choice leaves no excuses. So 3 days after the auction, I mailed them a plain envelope. No drama, no courier this time, just a simple letter on clean white paper. Inside, 2 options. Option 1. A 1-year rental contract at market rate. They could remain in the house on Magnolia Lane, provided rent was paid on time, HOA dues met, and no illegal subletting occurred. Option 2. Cash for keys. For $1,000 if they vacated by March 1st, leaving the house in good condition and settling all HOA balances. I signed it simply, Ellen Roberts, owner. The word owner sat heavy at the bottom of the page. Ava, of course, responded not with ink but with pixels. The next morning my phone buzzed with a notification. She was live again, her camera angled just so to catch the light in her tear-brimmed eyes. "We've been robbed," she whispered dramatically. "Our home was stolen by a bitter relative. Now she's trying to bribe us to leave. Can you imagine? Putting a price on our family memories? For $1,000 like we're disposable?" Comments flooded in. At first, sympathy. "Stay strong, Ava. You deserve better." But the internet has teeth, and soon came the other voices. "Didn't you humiliate her at Christmas? Screensh *TS say you called her toxic. Why lie? Maybe don't buy $600 worth of lipstick if you can't pay your HOA." Within minutes, Ava ended the stream, eyes flashing with rage. I didn't reply. I didn't watch the meltdown twice. Because while she fumbled for sympathy, the letter sat on their counter, silent and undeniable. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at my house. I opened it to find Mark standing there alone. No Ava, no phone, no theatrics. He looked smaller somehow, as though the uniform he wore had shrunk him rather than given him strength. His hair was unkempt, his eyes shadowed. "Mom," he said softly, his voice breaking on the word. I stepped aside, gesturing him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I had once cut his sandwiches into triangles, where he had practiced spelling lists with crayons scattered across the surface. Now he sat hunched, hands clasped, eyes wet. "I'll sign," he whispered. I studied him. Option 1 or 2? He swallowed hard. "Cash for keys. Ava won't agree to rent. She says it's beneath us. She says living under your roof again would make her look pathetic." His mouth twisted in bitterness. "She cares more about what strangers think than what's happening in this family." I didn't reply immediately. I let silence stretch, the kind of silence that forces truth out of hiding. Finally, he lifted his eyes. "Please don't throw us out before March. I'll make sure the house is spotless. I'll pay the HO. Just give me time." I folded my hands on the table. My voice was even. "Then March 1st. Keys in hand. Cash in yours. That's the agreement." His shoulders sagged with something like relief. As he stood to leave, I touched his arm lightly. "Mark," I said, "take care of yourself. Your daughter needs a father who's sober and honest, not one hiding behind excuses." He nodded, eyes wet again. He didn't argue. He didn't defend Ava. He just whispered, "I'm sorry for Christmas." "Don't tell me," I said coldly. "Tell the family group chat." That night, as if on cue, a new message appeared in the family WhatsApp. Mark had posted a long apology, acknowledging his silence at Christmas, admitting the humiliation I had endured, promising to make amends. For a full day no one replied. Not Ava, not her parents, not the cousins who had once laughed at her toast. The silence was louder than their applause had ever been. Meanwhile, Ava clung to denial. She hosted one more live stream, this time from the bare living room, walls stripped, boxes stacked in corners. She wore oversized sunglasses though it was evening, her voice brittle. "We've been forced into this. Our home is being stolen. We're victims of elder cruelty. But we will rise again." The comments scrolled mercilessly. "Victims? You mocked her at Christmas. This is elder abuse, yes, but you are the abuser. Where's Mark? Why isn't he standing beside you?" The live ended after 3 minutes. The cracks widened. By mid-February, the Magnolia Lane house looked like a ghost. Curtains gone, furniture thinned, neighbors whispering as moving trucks came and went. Ava stopped appearing outside. Mark, true to his word, scrubbed the porch, trimmed the hedges, even patched a section of lawn where fireworks had scorched the grass. On February 28th, I drove by once more. The house looked almost respectable again, like it was waiting for new life. Inside, Mark packed boxes silently. Ava refused to appear. March 1st arrived cold and bright. I pulled into the driveway at 10 o'clock sharp, envelope in hand. A check for $4,000 along with an inspection sheet. The house was spotless. Floors scrubbed, walls washed, refrigerator cleared. Mark had done it himself. I walked through each room with calm precision, clipboard in hand. No damage. No vandalism. Just emptiness, humming with the ghosts of arrogance. At the door I handed him the envelope. $4,000. In exchange for the keys. He pressed the metal into my palm slowly, almost reverently. His hands shook. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. I looked at him evenly. "Then stop saying it. Start living it." He nodded, shoulders trembling. Then he turned and walked down the driveway, head bowed, a single suitcase in his hand. Ava was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps hiding. Perhaps live-streaming one last performance of victimhood from the shadows. I didn't care. Because at that moment, the house on Magnolia Lane belonged not to them, not to their curated image, not to their lies. It belonged to me. And unlike them, I respected what I owned. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table with the keys on the counter beside me, the silence was immense. But it wasn't empty. It was clean. Final. Not eviction. Not cruelty. A choice. And they had made it. March 1st arrived colder than usual for Savannah. The air carried that sharp metallic edge that makes breath visible. As though even the weather wanted to bear witness. It was the deadline, the day the house on Magnolia Lane ceased being their sanctuary, or their stage, and reverted to what it always was, property bound by rules, signatures, and consequences. When I pulled up at 10 o'clock sharp, the neighborhood already stirred with quiet anticipation. Curtains twitched. Doors stood slightly ajar. Neighbors lingered at mailboxes far too long, pretending to sort envelopes while stealing glances toward the Roberts house. Gossip had primed them for weeks. Today was confirmation. The moving truck sat in the driveway, its ramp extended like a tongue. Cardboard boxes were stacked neatly inside, labeled in Mark's handwriting. Kitchen, clothes, miscellaneous. No trace of Ava's touch. Mark emerged from the garage carrying a box so heavy his arms trembled. He was thinner than I remembered, his uniform replaced by old jeans and a sweatshirt. He nodded once in my direction but said nothing. His silence was heavier than any insult Ava had ever thrown. The front yard, once a parade ground for fireworks and parties, now looked subdued. The hedges were trimmed. The porch swept. The burned patch of grass had been reseeded, green shoots just beginning to push through. Mark had tried, too late but sincerely. I stepped inside, clipboard in hand. My shoes echoed on bare floors. The living room was hollow, walls stripped of art and family photos. A faint square of dust outlined where the television had hung. The kitchen counters gleamed. The refrigerator wiped spotless, as though scrubbing could erase years of arrogance. Upstairs, the bedrooms were empty but for the indentations on the carpet where beds once stood. It was clean. Respectfully so. Back downstairs I found Mark standing in the foyer, keys in hand. His head hung low. "Ava won't come," he said quietly. "She says she has nothing to say to you." I almost smiled at the irony. Ava, who had never been able to resist an audience, now hiding in silence. Perhaps shame finally outweighed performance. Or perhaps she was live-streaming from some dark corner, still trying to spin ruin into sympathy. Either way, her absence spoke louder than her words ever had. "Then it ends with you," I replied. He placed the keys in my palm. Metal cold and final. I handed him the envelope. A check for $4,000 folded neatly. Cash for keys. Agreement fulfilled. He took it with trembling fingers. For a long moment, he stared at the paper as though it were both salvation and indictment. "I'm sorry for Christmas," he whispered. The same words again and again like a broken record. I met his eyes. "Don't tell me. Tell the family group chat. Tell the people who laughed when she called me toxic. Tell them what it cost." He nodded, his throat tight. By noon the truck pulled away. Neighbors stood openly now, no longer pretending. Mrs. Green folded her arms, lips pursed. Mr. Hardy, ever the accountant of the neighborhood, watched silently from his porch. Children pointed as the truck rattled down the lane, asking too loudly, "Where are they going?" Parents hushed them but didn't hide their own curiosity. Mark climbed into a small sedan parked at the curb. Alone. Ava never appeared. As he pulled away, I felt no triumph. Only inevitability. That evening my phone buzzed. The family WhatsApp group, long silent, lit with a new message. Mark had posted a paragraph, long, halting, written like a man forcing himself to peel away denial. I owe everyone an apology. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I let cruelty happen at my own table. I humiliated the woman who gave us everything. And we lost our home because of it. I can't undo it, but I will own it. For a long while the group was silent. Then one cousin responded with a single word. Respect. Another replied with a prayer emoji. No one defended Ava. Not even her own parents. The silence from those who had once laughed was louder than applause. I walked through the empty house on Magnolia Lane that night, keys jingling in my hand. The walls still carried the faint echo of laughter, but not the warm kind. Ava's sharp, mocking cackle preserved like a stain. The scent of bleach hung in the air, Mark's attempt to purify. In the master bedroom, I stood by the window where Ava had once filmed her live streams, the same window where neighbors had watched her perform her victimhood. Outside, the street was quiet. No parties, no fireworks, no music. Only silence. I whispered to the room. The music has stopped. When I locked the door behind me, I felt the finality settle in my chest. This wasn't just repossession of property. It was repossession of dignity. For years I had been treated as optional. An accessory. A wallet with feelings. They had called me unnecessary, toxic, burdensome. But on March 1st, their silence, their boxes, their absence told the truth. It wasn't me who was unnecessary. It was them. The eviction hadn't broken them. Not completely. Ava still believed she could control the story, that image could overpower paper, that performance could erase proof. She forgot the simple truth. Humiliation fades from memory, but contracts remain. In April, the final hammer struck. It began with Ava's job. Her agency concluded its review. The letter was brief, the kind of cold corporate prose she had once drafted for clients. Termination for ethical violations, effective immediately. They listed her misuse of client data, her public disparagement of family members on social platforms, her conduct inconsistent with the agency's values. Her influencer contracts dissolved next. One by one, the brands she tagged in glossy photos issued polite statements. We no longer collaborate with Ava Roberts. A perfume company deleted every post of her carefully curated smile. A clothing brand removed her from its ambassador list. The very platform she had *p***nized became archives of her collapse. **ts of her Christmas toast circulated in comment threads beneath articles about workplace ethics. Her reputation, the one thing she treasured above all else, crumbled like stale bread. But she wasn't finished. Ava hired lawyers. Slick men in gray suits, armed with folders and arrogance, convinced her she could claw back what had been lost. They filed motions, challenged the foreclosure, painted me as a vindictive relative abusing her financial knowledge to punish them. The summons arrived on thick paper, embossed with the county seal. It might have frightened another woman, but not me. I had already prepared. On the day of the hearing, I arrived early, binder in hand, its tabs neat and sharp. Mark sat on one side of the courtroom, pale and silent. Ava sat beside her lawyers, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses though the room was windowless. She didn't look at me. Her attorneys argued first. They spoke of elder manipulation, of predatory financial tactics, of familial coercion. They called me vindictive. They painted Ava as a dutiful daughter-in-law punished for speaking truth. Their voices rang with conviction, but their arguments floated without anchors. Then my lawyer, a calm man named Peterson, rose. He didn't speak of emotion. He spoke of numbers. Your Honor, here is the signed agreement between Ellen Roberts and the defendants. Condition 1. No luxury loans. Exhibit A. Receipts of $600 in cosmetics labeled as emergency expenses. Condition 2. No public insults. Exhibit B. Video of Ava Roberts at Christmas dinner, calling her mother-in-law toxic while raising a toast. Condition 3. No misuse of funds. Exhibit C. HOA letters, unpaid dues, illegal Airbnb rentals. The foreclosure was not predatory. It was procedural. Every violation is documented. Every condition broken. He slid the binder across the table. The judge leafed through it slowly, his brow tightening. Then came the witnesses. Mr. Hardy, the HOA president, testified with clipped precision. 3 consecutive quarters unpaid. Noise complaints logged. Illegal subletting documented. Mrs. Green, the neighbor, confirmed what she had seen. On Christmas, Ava called Ellen toxic at her own table. We all heard it. Even Mark, halting, voice raw, admitted under oath. My mother gave us $85,000. We violated the terms. I stayed silent when I shouldn't have. Ava shifted in her chair, sunglasses slipping, fury flashing in her eyes. Her lawyers tried to object. They called it hearsay bias manipulation. But paper doesn't lie. Signatures don't vanish. *TS don't forget. When the judge delivered his ruling, his words were plain. The foreclosure stands. The defendant's petition is dismissed with prejudice. With prejudice. Final. No appeal. Ava let out a strangled cry, the sound of glass cracking. Her lawyers gathered their folders in silence. Mark closed his eyes and lowered his head. Her ruin didn't end there. The HOA, armed with the court's decision, billed her personally for the false report she had filed against neighbors. Petty complaints about lawn lengths, trash cans, imagined noise. Each fine tallied against her. Her parents, long silent, finally closed the joint credit card she had used for years. Enough, her mother muttered in a rare public comment. We cannot enable this any longer. The internet, of course, refused to forget. Memes circulated. *TS of her Christmas toast beside photos of the foreclosure notice taped to her door. Captions read, "Here's to a year without toxicity, wineglass, right arrow foreclosure." She became a cautionary tale in local gossip threads. The PR professional undone by her own performance. And Mark? He filed for legal separation. Quietly. No live stream, no spectacle. Just paperwork, submitted with trembling hands. He enrolled in therapy. He joined a class at the community college, Finance for Firefighters. He began to rebuild himself brick by brick. He rented a small apartment not far from me, 1 bedroom, modest, clean. He shared custody of his daughter, my granddaughter, with Ava, who now struggled to balance bills without the cushion of my silence. He visited me on weekends. Sometimes he delivered bakery orders to River Street hotels, just as he had as a teenager. He showed me envelopes marked taxes, emergency, savings. He was learning. Slowly. Painfully. But learning. And Ava? She drifted. Terminated. Disgraced. Buried under fines. No stage left, no applause. Her streams dwindled to a handful of viewers. Her eyes, once sharp with triumph, dulled with bitterness. She had thought foreclosure was the worst. But foreclosure was just numbers. What came after was worse, being seen for what she was. Being stripped of the image she had spent a lifetime curating. Reputation is a fragile glass. Once shattered, it cannot be pieced together. On the night the court dismissed her case, I sat at my table once more, tea cooling in my cup, binder closed for the first time in months. Outside, Savannah's river rolled on, indifferent and eternal. I thought of Ava's toast. Here's to a year without toxicity. She was right, though not as she intended. The toxicity had been drained. Not from me. From her. And what replaced it was silence, merciless, clear, undeniable. What was worse than foreclosure? Losing the story. Losing the mask. Losing the power to spin lies into truth. That was Ava's punishment. And unlike foreclosure, there was no appeal. After the courtroom dust settled, life did not end. It began again. Quietly, firmly, like yeast rising in dough long after you think the work is done. My bakery, once an afterthought as I poured myself into supporting Mark and Ava, came alive again. I had let it run on autopilot for too long, handing off shifts to managers while I chased their crises. Now, with silence reclaimed, I rose before dawn as I had in the old days. The smell of yeast and sugar clung to my hands, comforting, familiar. At 4 a.m, I would unlock the back door, flick on the fluorescent lights, and stand in the kitchen where every corner remembered me. The counters gleamed under powder dust. The ovens hummed low, waiting. I slid trays of lemon tarts into the heat, the scent of citrus filling the air, sharp and clean. Mark began to join me. Not as a child, not as a dependent, but as a man learning. He delivered morning orders to River Street hotels, still in his firefighter uniform when his shift allowed. At first he stumbled, forgetting invoices, mixing up deliveries, but slowly the rhythm returned. He saved 20% of every paycheck, showing me envelopes labeled in his crooked handwriting. Taxes. Emergency. Daughter. The first time he held up that last envelope, his eyes shone with something I hadn't seen in years: humility. Responsibility. Mom, he said, I want her to grow up knowing money isn't magic. It's earned. I only nodded. Words weren't needed. Sundays became our ritual. After the bakery closed, we walked through Forsyth Park together. The oak trees arching overhead, Spanish moss swaying like whispers. My granddaughter ran ahead, chasing pigeons, laughing freely. For the first time in years, I felt that laughter belonged to me again. Not filtered through a locked photo album, not stolen by Ava's cruelty, but raw and real. Sometimes people stared. They knew the story. Savannah is a small city with a long memory. They whispered as we passed. That's Ellen. She's the one who took the house back. But I held my head high. Let them whisper. Truth was mine now, not theirs. Ava meanwhile unraveled. Word spread that she had taken a temporary job at a boutique, folding clothes and ringing up tourists. She filmed 1 or 2 live streams in the back room, begging for followers, promising a comeback. The comments were merciless. Didn't you call your mother-in-law toxic? Foreclosure queen. Maybe apologize instead of playing victim. Her audience shrank from thousands to dozens. Even pity dried up. She had thought her punishment was foreclosure. She didn't realize her true punishment was irrelevance. At the bakery, I started something new. I called it Recipes and Boundaries. Once a week, I gathered a group of women at the community center. We baked together simple things: caramel tarts, sweet rolls. But each recipe came with a lesson. Caramel, I told them one Tuesday, stirring sugar until it turned gold, teaches you patience. Rush it and it burns. Ignore it and it hardens. Wrong. Boundaries are the same. They laughed, but their eyes shone. One woman whispered, My daughter calls me only when she needs money. Maybe I've been letting the caramel burn. Another said, My son-in-law insults me in front of others. I pretend it doesn't matter. But it does. I nodded. We teach people how to treat us. If you let them mock you once, they'll do it again. If you let them eat without contributing, they'll return empty-handed. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're recipes for respect. The women clapped. Flour dusted our aprons, but the air felt lighter. I wasn't just baking. I was teaching survival. Neighbors came too, curious about the club. Mr. Hardy's wife attended one evening, shaking her head as she confessed, We forgave too much from them. We kept saying they'd grow out of it. They didn't. I replied simply, Accountability doesn't expire. Mark kept showing up. At first, I wondered if it was guilt pulling him back, but over time I saw something else: gratitude. He swept the bakery floors, lifted flour sacks, ran deliveries. He never asked for money. Not once. One Sunday as we locked up, he showed me his notebook. Inside were budgets, grocery lists, plans. I'm learning, Mom, he said, his voice firm. I don't want her, he meant his daughter, to grow up thinking dependency is love. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I reached over and patted the page. Keep balancing the books, I said. That's all it ever takes. People sometimes asked if what I had done was revenge. At church, one woman leaned close after service and whispered, Ellen, don't you think it was harsh? Taking the house? Exposing her? I looked at her steadily. Revenge is acting outside the rules. I did the opposite. I enforced them. They broke every condition. They mocked every sacrifice. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just stopped covering the bill. She lowered her gaze. She had no reply. The bakery thrived. Orders doubled. Word spread that Ellen Roberts, the woman who had balanced family betrayal with iron precision, baked the best lemon tarts in Savannah. Hotels signed larger contracts. Locals lined up at dawn. Each morning as I slid trays into the oven, I thought of dough rising. Slow, steady, inevitable. Once you know how yeast works, you don't fear collapse. You wait. You trust. You hold the line. That's what I had done with my family. I had held the line. Finally. Sometimes Ava's shadow flickered across my thoughts. Rumors drifted. She fought with her parents, she skipped rent. She posted vague quotes about toxic family cutting her off. But I didn't look. I didn't follow. She no longer mattered. Because as dough rose, so did we. Mark, humbled but steady. My granddaughter laughing in the park. My bakery warm with sugar and truth. And me finally free, not just of debt, but of the illusion that love can be bought with sacrifice. Love must be chosen. And I had finally chosen myself. When my daughter-in-law raised her glass at Christmas and told a roomful of strangers that I wasn't needed, I thought the words might finish me. I had been cut before, excluded from birthdays, dismissed in group chats, used as a bank and then mocked, but this was different. Public. Final. A toast to my erasure. But now I know something truer. Words don't finish you. They reveal what you must finish. By New Year's Eve their mortgage was gone, transferred, balanced, erased not by grace but by law. Their calls came at midnight, frantic, accusing, then begging. I let the phone ring. Ava texted a heart, a hollow white emoji meant to disguise panic as gratitude. I didn't answer. Because what awaited them was much worse than silence. It was consequence. They thought the worst thing that could happen was foreclosure. But foreclosure is only numbers. It is clean. Orderly. You sign, you pay, you lose. It does not humiliate. It simply balances the ledger. The much worse came after. The stripping of masks. Neighbors who once laughed at their parties began avoiding their eyes. Colleagues who once envied their curated life now whispered about ethics reviews and unpaid dues. The brands that once posted Ava's filtered face cut ties without ceremony. First she fought. She filmed, she cried, she insisted. But the internet doesn't forget. *TS circulated faster than her explanations. The clip of her toasting "Here's to a year without toxicity" became a meme. People paired it with the foreclosure notice taped to her door, captioned, "Toxicity was paying your mortgage, Ava." Her voice cracked under the weight of her own performance. Mark broke differently. Not with fury, not with denial. With silence. His shoulders slumped. His eyes avoided mine, but he did the work. He scrubbed the floors of Magnolia Lane before handing me the keys. He cleaned the lawn. He patched the scorch marks his fireworks had left. He returned the house to dignity as best he could. And then he left. By April he filed for separation. He enrolled in therapy. He studied finance at night, sitting in classrooms with men half his age, determined to understand what I had understood my entire life. Money is not love, but how you treat money reveals how you treat love. Slowly he came back. Not as the boy I raised, he was gone, but as a man stripped of illusions trying to build something real. Ava, though, refused to return. She still hides behind curtains of denial. I hear whispers. She works at a boutique now, folding clothes, selling to tourists. Sometimes she films in the stockroom, begging for followers, insisting she was wronged. Few watch. Fewer believe. She had once called me unnecessary. Now she is unnecessary to the very stage she worshipped. The world has moved on. Her name, once hashtags and contracts, is now cautionary tale. That is what was much worse. Not losing a house. Losing the mask. And me? I returned to the oven. The bakery thrived. Orders doubled. My recipes traveled again to River Street hotels, to weddings, to morning tables across Savannah. Flour clung to my hands, sugar dust sparkled in the air. And every tray of lemon tarts was proof. I still rose. I started a club at the community center. Recipes and boundaries. Women came with aprons and stories. We baked and we spoke of dignity. One said, "My son only calls me when he needs money." Another whispered, "My daughter-in-law mocks me when I'm not in the room." And I told them what I had learned, kneading dough with firm hands. We teach people how to treat us. If we allow them to eat at our table while they starve us of respect, they will. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are survival. The women clapped, flour on their cheeks, fire in their eyes. For once my lessons were heard. Sometimes people asked, "Ellen, was this revenge?" I answered the same every time. No. Revenge is emotional. This was enforcement. I didn't ruin them. They ruined themselves. I simply stopped covering the bill. Because that's all this was, balancing the books. Now when I sit at my kitchen table at night, tea steaming in my cup, I think of silence differently. For years silence was submission, the way I swallowed insults, the way I turned away from laughter aimed at me. But now silence is freedom. The phone no longer buzzes with demands. The family chat no longer fills with cruelty disguised as jokes. The house is mine again. Not just the deed but the air itself. And when I walk through Forsyth Park with my granddaughter's hand in mine, her laughter ringing against the oaks, I know exactly what Ava lost. She thought I wasn't needed for Christmas. But I am needed for this. For the baking, for the teaching, for the granddaughter who runs to me with open arms. For myself. This is the ending. But also the invitation. If you've listened this far, ask yourself, whose debt are you carrying? Whose disrespect are you swallowing? Which table have you been sitting at, pretending laughter doesn't cut? I stopped pretending. I enforced the rules. I chose myself. And I invite you to do the same. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. And survival, like dough, always rises.